Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. We are excited to welcome you to our closing session here today with Dr. Carmen Stewart, a friend and colleague who has been in our field for many years. I'm going to read a little bit about her. She has worked in adult literacy for 18 years, first as a volunteer tutor, instructor, program coordinator, program director, and instructional designer. She is the president and CEO of Aspire Consulting and Educational Services, conducting research, evaluation, professional development, executive coaching, and diversity training. Carmen is the president of the Ohio Adult Education Association, known as OACE, the moderator for the Links Community of Practice, as well as the chair of AALPD. And she has also presented many times at COABE. She is passionate about helping beginning readers and education directors about learning and instruction, and she dreams of eliminating illiteracy as a social problem. She has recently started a company, Ending Illiteracy, to extend her work assisted beginning readers beyond the adult literacy space. So we are really delighted to welcome her here today. She has a wonderful session, The Characteristics of Adult Learners, coming up, and help me welcome her by posting your name in the chat box. Thanks, Carmen.
All right. Okay, let me share. All right. I knew that was gonna, okay, here we go. So this is characteristics of adult learners. I'm very excited to talk that they're even doing this summit, but really happy to be a part of it. And this topic is near and dear to my heart because our learners are so special. So I packed a lot of information in here. And what I thought I would do is introduce you to a characteristic of the adult learner, but then also give you 3 bullets. I don't typically even have text on my screens, but Lindsay said she'd share these slides with all of you. And I wanted you to have these takeaways handy for when you go back to your locations. So the first thing about our students is that their backgrounds are very, very diverse. In age range, we serve students anywhere from 16 on up. My oldest student right now is 72 years old, and he's a beginning reader. They're diverse racially, culturally. We have ESOL students, we have ABE students, we have adult secondary students. So they're very, very diverse. Physical disabilities, learning disabilities, disabilities that are visible, that are not visible. So they're very, 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 very diverse. And I think what that means for us as practitioners is that we should be open and curious about our students' diverse backgrounds, meaning that we shouldn't be intimidated by the diversity, but we should use that as a pathway to learning for us and as a pathway to learning for our students. One thing we can do is commit to learning about the culture of our students in our classes. And that means us doing our own individual research, maybe even doing a survey at the beginning of class to kind of get a sense of what their backgrounds are, what their strengths are, what their interests are, what their needs are, what they hate about learning, what they love about learning, and really just kind of getting to know them and then taking the time outside of that to do some research about some things about them that maybe we don't know. So for example, if they're an immigrant from another country, maybe doing some background about, what happened in their country that made them need to leave. And so just getting a sense of educating ourselves and not putting the responsibility of learning about them on them, but then also inviting students to share about their cultures in ways that help every student learn, as well as us as instructors and administrators. The second thing, our students are busy. So I use this image of a juggler juggling with fire because sometimes they are putting out fires constantly as they're trying to pursue their education. So they have many different responsibilities. They wear lots of different hats. Our students are parenting. Sometimes they're caring for sick parents. Sometimes they're parenting their grandchildren. They may be taking care of a spouse or a sick spouse. A lot of times they have children with special needs. A lot of them are working. Some of them are business owners. They may be involved in their faith communities or just their general communities. They are busy, busy, busy people, and they carve time out of their lives for education. So I think it's important for us as adult educators to acknowledge the responsibilities and express admiration for their commitment to education. Because when you have a little bit of time and a lot of competing interests and you still make time for education, that is an indication of a commitment that you are putting that first. And I say that cautiously because often people then think the converse is true, that, oh, they didn't make time for education, so it isn't a priority. So I want us to be careful about making that assumption as educators, because we all make decisions every day about where we're going to invest our time. Most of us are committed to fitness, right? I did not go to the gym this morning. It doesn't mean it isn't a priority. It means that something else took the priority that day. So just know that with our students' competing interests, the competing roles and responsibilities, that sometimes their choice is going to be that they have to miss class. So have patience and grace when students have to address other responsibilities, and really think about how your program might be able to offer flexible options so that when students do miss, they can still participate. One example, I teach an online evening math class. I record all of my math classes because math is cumulative. So what students learn on Tuesday, they're going to need for Thursday, and that going to need that for the following Tuesday. And so since a student is missing class, I don't want them to be behind, but I also don't want the other students in my class to wait for me to have to catch them up. I do like to do a review before every class so that everyone feels pretty confident about what we're going into and to just again activate their prior knowledge. But I do try to make them flexible options. So I do have students who will miss class and watch the recording and then actually do the work that they missed, take a picture of it, send it to me, and then they're able to actually get class attendance hours for that time as well because they did put in the time even though it wasn't while I was online with them. So just considering flexible program options so that students can participate even when something else in life is demanding their attention. Our students may face a lot of barriers, and I say may because we can't assume that every barrier for every student is the barrier for the other students because they are so diverse. So we really try to be so many things to so many people, but we can't possibly be everything to everyone. So I think it's very important to work with community partners to address some of the barriers that your students may have. For example, we have a relationship with the Educational Opportunity Center at the community college here in Cleveland. It allows some of our students, because the college students are able to pay a small fee and their ID serves as a bus pass, our students are able to get a college ID through this partnership and they're able to ride the public transportation for free, which is really makes it possible for a lot of our students to attend class because public transportation is not cheap. So those partnerships allow us to do that, or finding partners who can help students who are going through some type of crisis so that they can address that crisis and not allow it to disrupt their education. A second thing we can do is consider what programmatically we can do or what instructional modifications can we make that might remove barriers from students. We had one class that was starting at 6 o'clock and students were consistently late to that class. And so we kind of took a poll of the students and asked what were some of the things that were happening that was preventing them from getting to class on time. So we just moved that class back to 6:30. It wasn't difficult to do that. And it made it so it was easier for students to attend the classes. So think about how your program may help remove barriers for students as well. And that could include offering virtual options or offering distance learning options so the students can still participate even if they can't be at your physical locations when you're there. And then I think the other important thing, particularly if you're new in this field, is to recognize that stop outs are not failures. So if a student isn't consistently in class, if they have to take a break to take care of something, that is a natural occurrence in adult education. And if we story that in our minds, if we narrate that as if that's a failure, it makes it that much harder for students to come back. And it also changes our attitude when they do come back. So for our program, we always tell students, even in their orientation, we let them know that if something happens and you need to take some time away, just let us know. And you don't have to let us know what's happening. You're an adult. We are, anticipating that you're handling your business. But if you say, I'm going to need 3 weeks where I'm not going to be in class, that means I won't be calling you during that time because I know that you're taking that time away and you and I can work out some arrangements for you to continue making progress in your classes. So just think about all the barriers they face and then try to be someone who helps remove some of those barriers. And even if you can't do it yourself, potentially having a community partner who can do that. Our students are diverse as learners. And when I say diverse as learners, I don't just mean between learners, I mean even within learners. So you may teach a class one day and every student is just really firing on all cylinders. And then you'll go back to that same content the next class session and it's like you never talked about it before. And just know that there is going to be that variation in what your class sessions feel like and how they operate. So our learners, it's helpful for us to learn about the learning process and to learn about memory and to share that information with your students. One thing that I think a lot of our students believe is that the second we look at something, we've learned it. They don't understand that we also reread. They don't understand that we underline, that we look things up in the dictionary. They don't know that we study. They haven't developed those habits. And that's part of the reason that they're in our programs is because they haven't developed those habits. So helping them understand that it helps when you see something visually. It helps when you listen to what I'm saying to you. It helps when you talk about this yourself. It helps when you do hands-on activities. It helps when you write notes. It helps if you can spend 10 minutes outside of class going over your notes from class or trying some of the problems. I often assign students to do odd number problems in class so they can do even number problems at home just for practice so that they don't forget things. It's helpful to help students understand that forgetting is a part of the learning cycle, but they can disrupt that forgetting cycle by spending some time, focusing on the content, just 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day, going over things so that they don't forget them. If there's professional development offered at COABE or at your state conferences on the role and impact of trauma-informed instruction is very, very important in our field. Trauma can impact students' ability to obtain information. It makes it difficult for them to remember things, for them to retrieve information. Sometimes it makes it difficult for them to focus even during class. And it's not predictable, the effects of trauma. So you may have a student who's very well adjusted, and then maybe the anniversary of a family member's passing or a traumatic event happens to fall during one of your classes, and that can impact them. So just really kind of trying to understand for yourself how trauma can impact a student's ability to learn. And to also keep in mind that something that may be easy for you to retain or strategies that may be easy for you to implement may not be as easy for our students, and that they may need more practice and support. Also understanding that just like us, our students will have days where they're just off. I have days where I am just feeling like I can accomplish anything, and there are days where I just cannot figure things out. I'm just off. And our students will have those days as well. So just having some grace with them with that. And then understanding that family issues, illnesses, death, domestic violence, all of those things impact the students because they're not able to necessarily set those things aside. In this last program year, I had 4 students, one who left the program because, she was an online student, and her partner would disable their Wi-Fi in the evenings to keep her from participating in class. I had another student whose partner asked me outright, well, what's going to happen to me once she learns how to read? So know that there are people who are in their lives who are also kind of trying to disrupt them from this journey. So for our part, we need to not be a part of that disruption. All of our efforts should be supporting our students. I know it sounds like, oh, of course I'm going to support my students, but sometimes we don't think about the ways that the things that we do can actually impact students in a negative way. So I love this image of someone covering their face because I've had students actually physically do that when they come in, because sometimes our students are anxious. Sometimes they're embarrassed about where they are. I've had students say, well, I'm 40 years old. I should know fractions already. And I always say, don't use that word should on yourself, because these aren't things that you automatically learn to breathe. You automatically learn to crawl. You eventually learn to walk. But all the things that we're teaching them, these are not natural processes for humans. They just aren't. And so we have to learn that. So they may have had a lot of academic failure in the past. They may not even see themselves as learners, as students, as scholars. So we use that word over and over. Aspire Scholars, welcome to the program. Aspire Scholars, here's the latest math reporting, because we want them to begin to identify as that, because for so long they haven't. So understand that they may be anxious and that they may be embarrassed. And the best way to me to get beyond the students' anxiety and embarrassment is to help them understand that there are 48 million Americans who also struggle. So obviously, if there's something happening where 48 million Americans are struggling, the problem is probably the system and not you. So it helps students to situate the problem where it belongs, which is in our school system and not with themselves necessarily individually. And yes, there are some instances where students will take ownership for, well, I could have stayed. But my perspective is, if students are getting something from something, if any of us, if we're getting something from something, if it's effective, we stick with it. But if you've been going to the gym for 9 months and you're not getting any smaller, you're going to probably stop paying that membership, right? So we have to think about the fact that when students separate from our programs, is it them or is it us? And we need to really ask those questions and try to make sure that we're keeping the pulse of our students so that we're implementing practices that support their retention in our programs. I also like to share with people that there's research in K-12 education where this researcher looked at how students use learning and how they learn reading and how they read using for reading for learning. And what she said is that from kindergarten and 3rd grade, students they're learning to read, but they can't read well enough to use that reading to acquire knowledge. But by 4th grade, students are able to acquire knowledge using their reading skills. The way that this is interpreted in K-12 education is from kindergarten and 3rd grade, students learn to read, and then from 4th grade on, they read to learn. What is the practical application of that? The practical application is that in K-12 schools, we don't really teach reading past the fourth grade. So what does that mean? That means if a student is in your program, it means they've been struggling since they were 8. And if they were 8 years old, it was not their responsibility to say, you know what, I'm not getting this reading thing. I think I need a few more assessments and maybe some different interventions. It is the adults who were in their lives at that time who didn't advocate on their behalf, who didn't catch that they were struggling, or who didn't intervene, and maybe because they didn't know how. But I think it's helpful for students to understand that, because they realize that, it wasn't me being lazy all these years. It wasn't me not applying myself all these years. English is very difficult to learn to read. English is orthographically opaque. It is not clear which letter makes which sounds in which situations. So I try to explain that to students because I want to get that embarrassment out of the way, because it can also be a barrier to learning and retention. If they're so anxious about that, it limits their working memory. It limits everything. So I try to make sure that they understand that as well. And then the other thing is to help students adopt a growth mindset. If you're not familiar with the fixed mindset, growth mindset, a fixed mindset is when students come in and they say, well, I can't do math. That's just not my thing, or I don't do technology. And they completely disqualify themselves from learning a whole entire content area. That's a fixed mindset. Where a growth mindset says, you know what, if I come into this math class, if I pay attention, if I'm taking notes, if I study after class, if I do the homework that's assigned, if I, ask questions when I have class, if I put in the time, a growth mindset focuses on the inputs, the things that students can actually control. I can control how much effort I put in. I can control how much I pay attention. I can control how many days I come to class. So try to get students to focus on how much effort they put in and let them know that they're going to get out of it what they put into it, rather than thinking that they're just terrible at it and they're never going to get it. Because as long as they're thinking that way, they're not, because they'll undermine their efforts. So I love to set students up with success early so that they can go, oh, and I go, oh, that math that you hated, or I love when students come in and they go, math was my least favorite subject and now I love it. So we have the power, adult educators, to change that mindset by helping students have those successes. Another very, because we think about, as a culture, we think of people who've not completed high school as dropouts. And I would discourage you strongly from using the term dropouts, because if our students were dropping out, they wouldn't be in our programs, right? They're continuously learning. They're lifelong learners. They're continuing to pursue something that's been elusive for years. That is not a dropout in my mind. So strike that word from their vocabulary and don't let them. We say to our students that you discontinued your compulsory education. We give them that terminology rather than using dropouts, because they're still focusing on that. So we try to look at their gifts and their talents, because they have so many of them. And a lot of them have gifts and talents that they don't really recognize, because just things that they do naturally. So the first thing that I always ask educators to do is really examine yourself and make sure that you're not looking at our students from a deficit model, because often they are, and it's going to take you seeing their potential for them to see their potential. And when I say looking at them from a deficit model, I mean, if you're thinking of them as dropouts, they're going to think of themselves as dropouts. If you think of themselves as low learners, they're going to think of themselves as low learners. So get all of that out of the way and think about their potential, and then think about what you can accomplish with them as a partner in their learning and helping them to learn. Really, really focus on accentuating the positive. In our orientation, we ask students, tell me your name. What brings you to this program? What are you hoping to get out of it? And what is your superpower? And we explain to them that so often students come to us talking about what they can't do. Well, I can't do math, and I can't add, or I can never figure out fractions, or I can't write, I can't do an essay. I failed this test too. Yeah, we get that. There are some things that you can't do. What can you do? Because we want to know about what their strengths are, and we want them to start thinking about themselves in that way. We want all of their conversations to be positive, and not toxically positive where we pretend like they don't have deficits, but where they're focusing on the journey and their destination, and not focusing on the past and the things in their past that maybe haven't worked out in their favor, haven't worked as well as they wanted to. And then the other thing is to find ways to allow students to operate in their own strengths. So think about this. Think about the one thing that you hate doing. Maybe you're not good at math. Maybe it's statistics. Maybe you're terrible at technology. Maybe you're not mechanically inclined. Maybe you don't like writing. What if you only were able to prove your intelligence through that one thing that you hate, right? So often we only give our students an opportunity to shine or to try to prove themselves in the things that they already know they struggle with. So try to find ways to allow students to operate in their strengths. If they're good artistically, use their artistic talent to help create graphs or something like that for a data analysis unit. Like whatever their strengths are. If it's cooking, maybe you have a class celebration and they bring in food or whatever. So I just think about ways to look at their strengths and to acknowledge their strengths and to use them if you can for your benefit because they're there. But let's define them first. Our students are like this little Swiss Army knife on my screen. They're very creative, they're very adaptive, and they come up with ways to accomplish the things that they accomplish in life, even without the literacy skills that some of us have taken for granted our whole lives. So the first thing that I want you to remember is that because they're adaptive, keep in mind that being low literate does not equal unintelligent. Many students, if you talk to them, if you have a one-on-one conversation with them, they'll tell you, like, I think of this one student, he would say, I know I have potential. I know what I could accomplish. But the thing that was standing in his way is that he didn't know how, he never learned to read. He memorized words, but he never learned to read. And so he was very, very intelligent. He could remember, like if we were having conversations, you would not know at all that he was struggling with literacy. So remember that just because their literacy scores on these things that we're testing them on may be low, it doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. A lot of our students do things with money that we couldn't accomplish because they've learned, how to manage with what they have. So just keep in mind that just because they test into an NRS level 1 or 2, it doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. Also, understand that students have developed coping mechanisms, both emotional and academic. And when I say emotional coping skills, a lot of times that's defensiveness. So keep in mind that students may come to class, they may be defensive, they may be angry, they may be a little bit oppositional, and don't take it personally and just understand, meet them where they are and try to move them along. I used to have a student who would come to math class and she would be so, I can't even, she would be like for the first 10 or 15 minutes in class, she would just be grumbling about everything. Like, I mean, I would say good morning and she would just growl back at me. It was like, what is going on with this woman? And so we would start class and we'd be maybe 15, 20 minutes into class. And then all of that would kind of fall away and she would just be like a regular human being. And she was lovely once she got past that point. But that's where she was every day. One story that I will share is that she was in class with a younger student, and the younger student was working on recovery. Like had just gotten out of prison and she was trying to get sober and everything. And so this older woman who was coming to class and just being a grouch for the first 15 minutes for whatever reason, one day came in and she was just like, I have to take 2 buses to get to this program. Okay, so I really can't control that. We try to locate where there aren't current programs, right? And so the student who's focusing on recovery looked at her and said, you know what? She said, I took 3 buses to go get drugs. So if you really want it, you'll figure it out, right? And it was like something in that conversation shook the lady who would come in grumpy every day. And for the rest of that class session, she was so docile. I'm like, how could I pay this other student to say something like that every class session? But I mean, so the point is that they come up with these defenses and they really are protective. And they're protective because they've been harmed in the past. So if you try to keep that in mind, it keeps you from taking things personally and then reacting rather than responding. Other coping mechanisms that they come up with in terms of learning, beginning readers often have learned how to use surrogates. They find someone who can read for them. If I was sitting with any of you at a restaurant and I couldn't read, I would just say, hey, I don't have my glasses. Can you read the menu? And you would all do it. You would all read the menu to me because I don't have my glasses, because we have compassion for people who can't see. We don't have the same compassion for people who can't read across the board. So just understand some of those coping mechanisms. I had one student who was so like, he would say things like, oh, I'm going to take my driver's test. And if the word is EM, then I know it's emissions, because there are not a lot of other EM words that have to do with automobiles and driving. And he remembered that, and he saw, anytime he saw SAV, he knew that that spelled save because of the Save a Lot grocery store down. Like he had this whole system of how he connected syllables and word parts to other things so that he could remember how they sounded. And it was so interesting, but you can tell it's like a very sophisticated filing system in his head that allows him to keep track of all of those connections. So they're very, very intelligent, and don't let them make you think otherwise. So the other thing is just respect the tools in their toolkit. Sometimes I had a tutor one time at a program that I was working with, and she happened to mention, she was working with a man who was in his 60s and he was working on math. And she said, he's too old to be counting on his fingers. And I couldn't wait to get her off to the side so we could have a conversation that if he takes off his shoes and uses his toes to let him count whatever works for him. The goal is for him to learn, for him to feel good about himself, and you talking about him counting on his fingers isn't really helping that. So respect the tools that are in their toolkit. Respect the things that they use to learn. Sometimes students have some very unconventional methods for figuring things out, and allow them to use that if it's not going to be detrimental to what it is that they're doing, like truly detrimental. Our students can be very self-directed and independent. Students who are self-directed, you don't have to, they're coming to class, they've already got materials, they're not looking for you to give them a pen or pencil, they already have paper, they have their own notebook, and yeah, this is wonderful that your program's providing that, but I have it. I'm going to learn this today, I'm going to work on this, I'm going to go to this website after class and look this up, and be okay with that. That self-direction is a wonderful thing. When students are independent, that is a great thing. So another thing that we can do to support students who are self-directed and independent, beyond encouraging it, is scaffolding learning so that we can help build that self-direction and independence in other students. Because part of the reason that some students are dependent and are not self-directed is because they aren't confident. So we can build that by scaffolding our learning experiences. And what I mean by that is this: when you're scaffolding learning, you provide support to a student, a lot of support in the beginning, and then you kind of withdraw that support and shift more of the responsibility of learning onto the student so that they can have time to build confidence and to acquire skills and to learn vocabulary to complete something. So for example, if I'm teaching a student how to find a common denominator in fractions, I may start off by saying there are 3 different ways to find a common denominator, and I'll demonstrate each of the 3 ways. And I'll talk about the strategy, I'll show them how to use it. I'll talk about the second strategy, I'll show them how to use it. So third strategy, etc. The second time through, I'll do it exactly the same way where I'm talking throughout the whole entire thing. The third time through, I'll ask them to tell me what the name of the strategy is. So I'm shifting the responsibility for some of this conversation now to the students. And so they tell me the name and then I work it out. The next time through, they tell me the name and they tell me how to work it out. The next time through, they do everything. And then I say, okay, great, let's split into small groups and give them some practice problems to work out. And those small groups, I find the students who are more self-directed, independent, who are getting it. And I make them kind of a team lead or a captain in each of those smaller groups so that there's still someone leading those conversations. So students who are a little bit more reluctant get another opportunity to see this all happen, to hear the explanations, to get walked through it. They're getting the repetition. And then little by little, I ask students to do things independently. And so scaffolding is removing the support and shifting more of the responsibility for learning to them as they begin to become more confident and more independent in their learning. And the other thing is mobilize those folks, people who are self-directed, people who are independent, people who have natural leadership ability, use them up because they're great for your program. So COABE has some wonderful resources. Kristen Hempel and Aaron Borbornik have done some amazing work over the years with the students as Leader Strand, doing the training, the ambassador training. So how you can train your students to become ambassadors for your program, to speak well about your program in public, to help recruit students, to help with donors. And so use those folks who are independent and self-directed. They're a very, very good resource. Our students possess a lot of background knowledge. Actually what I'll say is there's a range of that. When you have students who are beginning readers, sometimes beginning readers keep their worlds very, very tiny. So their background knowledge is very limited. And for example, I worked with a young lady who didn't know how to, she was learning to read, and we use rhyming a lot with beginning readers, and she did not know what a rhyme was. And so I asked her, well, what about nursery rhymes? Did you ever do nursery rhymes as a kid? And she said, no, I never done any nursery rhymes. What about poetry? Do you like any poetry? No, I never done any poetry. What about songs? Well, I don't really listen to much music. And it was just like, come on, lady, give me something. But she kept her world very small, so she didn't have a lot of background knowledge. On the other hand, some of our students have so much information that you learn more, you learn as much from them in class as they do from you, because they're able to bring some of that background knowledge to the fold. So how do we do that? The first thing we do is we activate their prior knowledge. So if we're doing a literacy-based topic, we can always ask students to tell me, like, this is what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Tell me what you already know about the topic. Or asking students, go learn something about this topic. Watch a YouTube video, put it on Twitter or X or whatever they call it now. Find something about this topic and bring it to class so we can talk about it, right? So you can activate what they already know, or you can give them an assignment, ask them to bring knowledge in. So because they possess a lot of background knowledge, it's not like working with little kids who haven't maybe been to many places or haven't seen a lot of things. Our students have had a lot of experiences that we can bring into the learning learning environment. So use their experiences and use their expertise. And again, surveys at the beginning help you figure out what areas of expertise students have. And then you can kind of fold that into your instruction. And then the other thing is just be prepared to plug in holes that exist and explore any confusion. So if you're working with students and you're saying, well, what do you all already know about the Civil War? If you have students who are like, well, I know it's between the North and the South and the Confederacies in the North and Unions in the South, you can say, you know what, that's a great question. Who was in the North and who was in the South? Let's make sure that we look for that when we start this unit, when we start this reading. Let's make sure that we're paying attention to that. So using that background knowledge to help your class conversation and to use it as a teachable moment. Really, when students misunderstand something, so for example, with order of operations, because students learn, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, they think that multiplication always comes before division when that isn't the case. And the same with addition and subtraction. So when you use their misconceptions or their misunderstandings, learning from those mistakes, they're more likely to retain that. So they go, oh, you know what? I always thought that you were supposed to multiply first, but now I know. And so they hold on to that. So those misunderstandings, it's good to know that. So one way to find that out is to ask people, what do you know about this before we already start? Because those things kind of bubble up to the surface and then you can address them as the instructor. Our students are also very, very motivated. And often they're motivated for internal reasons and sometimes for external reasons. We have students who say, I got all of my kids through education, and now it's my turn. Or I've got kids who don't want to go to school and I can't tell them to go because I haven't finished. And so I want to come back. Or you have students who say, I want to start my own business, or I want a career. I don't want to just have a job. So they're motivated. How do we keep that motivation going? Well, there's a theory called self-determination theory, which is a motivation theory for adults. And it tells us that if we focus on relatedness, competence, and autonomy, we can help to keep students motivated. Relatedness, what is that? As providing opportunities for students to form social bonds in class. And that relatedness could be from having them work on group activities. One very good way to build community is to create a common enemy. So sometimes I play the jerk for something. I give them something to do that frustrates them because they're frustrated, or I may offer a viewpoint that they don't agree with. I know they're going to disagree with. And they kind of become united against my opinion or my position. And that helps to form the social bonds and it kind of breaks that down. So, for example, an activity where we'll talk about patients. They had a whole lot to say about that because they were not appreciating the assignment. They really, really enjoyed it after they did it. But they kind of felt formed a camaraderie about the fact that they had to do this thing that they weren't really so excited about doing. And then they did it and they had a great time. And we collected a lot of really good data that we were able to analyze. But provide opportunities for them to form those social bonds because those social bonds also keep them. What happens is they start going on break together and they have a conversation or they share a cigarette or, talk, whatever, talk about whatever's happening in class. And then they come back in and they're more bonded. And then what starts to happen is they start exchanging phone numbers when they're out there. And then someone isn't in class and they start doing my retention work for me because I'll say, oh, I don't see Lana. And they'll go, oh, I talked to her and she has a doctor's appointment today. So she's not going to be in class. So they kind of, they keep each other together when they're related. If they want to be in class, they don't want to miss when they have an opportunity to see people who they care about and who feel care about them. So relatedness. And then also your relationship with the students contributes a lot to that too, because students get to the point where they don't want to disappoint you. Also, competence. If you give students opportunities to be challenged but not overwhelmed, if you give them things that push them a little bit, but that they can accomplish, it makes them to feel competent. And who doesn't like to be someplace where they feel like, hey, I'm valued here and I can do this and I'm smart and I feel really good today. I love when students leave class and they're like, this was a really great class, or I really learned something today. I love that. So we need to build in those opportunities for them to feel a little bit challenged, but also feel competent. And then also students are provide opportunities for them to be autonomous, which means we give them opportunities and we give them options. So for them to decide how they want to learn something. So I'll ask students, okay, so listen, this is what we're working on today. How do you want to do this? We did the coordinate plane. We can go outside because it's nice and we can draw it on chalk, with sidewalk chalk and we can actually walk the coordinate plane. We can stay inside in the air conditioning and we can use painter's tape and create the coordinate grid, or we can just do the worksheets. And they're like, well, let's do the one inside, But they helped me create a coordinate grid on the floor in the class. And they learned how to find the points in the different quadrants. by literally walking those points and learning that I have to take steps to the right for the positive on the x-axis, or negative on the to the left for the negative on the x-axis. I have to go up, whatever. And so, like, giving them an opportunity to decide, how are we going to learn this? Or, hey, we're doing this unit on data analysis. Do you all want to collect our own data, or do you want me to bring in different data sets for you? Like, what do you want? How do you want to do this? Or letting them choose, well, we want to do this as a whole group, or we want to do this as a small group, or we want to work individually, or let's do the odd numbers in class, Dr. Carmen, and we'll do the even numbers at home. So just giving them opportunity to decide what we're going to do and how we're going to learn it. Or if I have activities stationed around the room, I can say, well, you choose where you start. I don't care where you start. I just want to make sure that you're all doing this. If we're doing probability, if you want to do coins and you want to do die and you want to do the spinner and you want to do picking marbles out of you choose how you want to go. That's all up to you. So give them opportunities to be autonomous in class. Some of our students may experience poverty. Many of them experience it. And so really, really think about class bias, because I think we talk about bias a lot in this country. And I think the biggest bias is between classes. And I don't think we necessarily acknowledge it. I fought with myself because there was a slide that I've shared in other presentations about teaching students in poverty that focused on the fact that sometimes there's a tendency for middle class people to want to control the behavior of people who. And the slide that I fought with myself with, and it was way the rules were written with full letters and learn how to set up your voicemail and then check your messages and da-da-da. If you need a doctor's appointment, schedule it on days that you don't have class. Like, it was the most offensive set of rules I've ever seen. And I can't imagine that program was able to retain students, because if that's your attitude coming in the door, how are you treating them once you get there? That was the first thing that you saw on their website. So examine your class bias and be sure that don't communicate with students in a way that you wouldn't want them communicating with you. Don't ask them to do things that you're not willing to do yourself. I mean, really think of the golden rule as it applies to your students. Even if they don't have your education, even if they don't have your income levels, even if they don't have what you feel are your values or morals, really, really park that bias at the door in class and focus on how you can help the students get to their goal, because that's ultimately what we're there for. Don't expect students to be as reliant or proficient with email as you are. They're not. A lot of our students only use email because we're reaching out to them. They only put in an email address for things because you have to have it sometimes to go forward in a form, right? Not because they're checking their Gmail account every day. Our students, a lot of times, if they don't have the money to pay their phone bill, their phone number is going to change. So their phone numbers change frequently. So what happens? You set up an email account for them. It's connected to their phone. They lose their phone. You try to get into their email. What is Gmail going to do? Send a message to the phone that they no longer have, so they can't get in it. So their email accounts and their phone numbers change frequently. And that's just a part of serving students who are experiencing poverty. And we just have to be okay with that. And what that means is, maybe at your intake, you ask for the phone numbers of 3 people that they trust, who you can reach out to if you can't get in touch with them. And to be sure that when we're contacting people on their behalf, it's, I want to give her this information for class, or can you have her call me? And not that you're discussing students' progress or their absence or behavior, anything like that, with someone that they trust. It's just a way to get in touch with them if you can't get to their number. So being sure to think about that as a part of your intake process. They also relish relevance. Adults always want to know, why do I need to know this? And saying it's on the test is not enough. It's not convincing enough to make people really fight through it. Our brains are programmed to only focus on those things that we need. So by the time we're older, we're like, listen, if I'm not going to use this, I'm not really going to commit a whole bunch of time to remembering it. So help them understand, try to connect the course content to the roles that they fill. If you're teaching math at all and you're not talking about financial literacy, what are you even doing? There's so many opportunities to build in financial literacy, in addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions, decimals, like really ratios, proportions, percents, the distance and cost, like all of those things can be tied to their pocketbook. And students understand that. They understand money, they get it. And so that's a really great way to kind of contextualize things for them. Or if you know that they're interested in different career fields, find ways to connect the things that they're doing to different careers. We have a lot of students who are going into manufacturing, and they need to be able to go back and forth between decimals and fractions to within an eighth of an inch. So making sure that they know how to do that and understanding that that's on the entrance exam for the employer. And then also looking to connect content to current events. I remember doing a unit with students on the Pilgrims and Puritans and religious freedom, and they were just like, yeah, okay, right. And they were not interested in it at all. And this was back before Twitter was crazy, and there was still Twitter. And so I just looked on Twitter for religious freedom, and this story came up about this woman who looked like most of my students. And she was in another country, and I can't remember which now because this was in like 2007 or 2008. And she was a Christian, and she was going to be executed if she didn't denounce her Christianity. Well, that shifted the whole conversation because became a lot more relevant. Students really started to understand that because they've always had religious freedom, they don't know what it's like, and they thought that that was like an ancient concept. No, this is happening in 2006, or someone's about to be executed for not denouncing what she believes and what a lot of them believe. So really trying to connect to current events and trying to make them understand, like, why is this important for me to know? How do I use this? One of my most useful math lessons was on the order of operations, and we were talking about nutrition. So students were looking for their body mass index and their basal metabolic rate, and looking at how many calories they burn at a certain weight if they exercise for 20 minutes at a certain exertion level. And then they looked at how many calories are in a Big Mac, side of fries, and a large Coke. And really figuring out, like, if it's 3,500 calories in a pound, how much do I have to exercise, and what calories do I have to stay under to be able to lose 2 pounds in a week? Like, that was one of the coolest lessons because they learned so much about something that a lot of them were really actually concerned about, or curious at least about. And they also learned how to do the math. So, like, really trying to find ways to connect what they're learning to things that they're actually going to have to do. And I think this is my last slide, and that is that often adult learners trust people, but they don't trust institutions. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is maybe read about, research, but definitely recognize the historical harm that institutions have caused marginalized people in this country, whatever students you're serving. And also consider, even with our immigration process, how long it takes to get through that process. And if you don't know, it's definitely worth looking at how long it takes to get a green card, or to get a visa, or to get, like, all that process, how long it takes to do that, and how difficult it can be, and how traumatized people are by the fear that, none of us have to travel with our papers. Can you imagine? Like, I don't even have my driver's license half the time because I don't carry a purse. So, like, knowing that you have to have these papers or you're going to be arrested, I think that that's a different level of consciousness that some of us haven't really experienced. So really understanding that institutions have caused a lot of harm. And so we also have to focus on help understanding that, and then focus on building your relationship with the students and relationships with other key staff members that they're going to interact with, because establishing trust and establishing relationships with you and key staff members will help them then to trust your institution. But they're not going to take the institution at face value. Also, institutions don't always last. So I've had students say, I was going to this program and I thought that it was pretty good, and I saw that, and I heard people talk about it, and I was going to go up there, and I went up there yesterday, and that building is empty. So there's a reason that they don't have those relationships. The other thing is, because people trust people and not institutions, if you're trying to refer a student to a community partner, introduce them to the person and start that conversation person to person. That's called a warm transfer the number to the rape crisis center. Here's the number to the legal aid. Like, or maybe even involve them and say, hey, listen, the library is going to be closed on Thursday, so we can't have class on Thursday here. Would you guys like to go somewhere else? Or do you want to just not have class? Or do you want to try to do virtual? Like, include them in that, because it allows them to feel some ownership and not feel like they're blindsided and like they lose trust in you and your institution. All right, so that's it. I'm going to open the chat and see. I thought that, giving you some background about the learners, I think is great, but I also think that it's more important to say, well, because of this, here's what you can do from it. Um, okay, I'm trying to look at comments and see if there are any questions in here. If there are questions, I'm happy to field them. I think these are all intros. Okay. um, Yes. Okay. So Lisa says growth mindset, not yet. Um, if I'm 72 years old, telling that to my students never fails to make them comment on how I'm still moving around. It helps them see themselves and others, and AL is the spot because there's so many stories you'll never run out. Absolutely. So thank you all so much for committing to this. I have so much love and admiration for adult literacy educators, whether you're in the classroom or work in an administrative role. We really do life-changing work that not a lot of people appreciate. And so don't worry about external accolades. You are making a difference for somebody, and I really appreciate that. Some of you could be doing so much more, earning so much more somewhere else. And I appreciate that you're bringing your gifts and talents to helping people who people often say, oh, your students are getting a second chance. Some of our students are getting a first chance. So I love that. Thank you. I will always remember the class I had that sent me cookout pictures after they all completed the program and were celebrating. That's wonderful. Okay. All right. Okay. So great. I don't see questions. I see tons of comments. I can't get to them all. Any questions? I'm trying to see if there are any questions. Oh, thank you. Appreciation for the real stories. I have a zillion real stories after 20 years in this field. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I hate some people are freezing. Okay, someone said, knowing that almost everyone who hurt my students looked like me helped me to understand why their brains shut off when in close proximity. Yes, or when a public setting where shame could happen. It made me change my approach to physical space and public facing. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all so much. I'm so glad that you're here. Lindsay, I'll stop talking so you can go. Oh, Kristen's on this call. So if you have questions about the students as leaders, if you want to use your self-directed independent students, Kristen and Erin Verbornik do amazing work with them. So make sure you reach out to them because you want your learners at that COABE conference and you should be there as well. And I mean, it can be really transformative. It can. And I tell you, it also takes, it's so much more convincing at a outreach event when students are talking to people who are in the process than you. Like I'm not convincing at all, but my students can get them to like really decide to commit. So okay, I'll stop talking, Lindsay, Sharon, so you guys can take over. Thank you everyone so much.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. That was amazing. I know that I'm speaking for everyone here today, just saying that that was so much great information that really put things into our hands that we can take back into our classrooms and programs. And I appreciate the shout out for the Students as Leaders work. That is definitely something that is very near and dear to my heart. And I hope that everyone in the webinar here does do a little digging and joins with that movement. So we've really appreciated your involvement and championing of it. But I also just want to say thank you to all of today's presenters for sharing such timely and relevant information and for leading us in a meaningful day of growth and learning. And I know that I do speak for all of us, over 600 of us who attended, when I say that I'm excited to get back into my program and put all of this into action. I feel like I'm walking away with a really long to-do list, but very motivated and positive about the changes that we can bring into our communities and that we can impact our extended communities together with. So that said, I do hope that you will all see this as that shared learning journey. This is not just a one-day event, but that you stay connected and that you do that by participating in COABE events and webinars in our communities of practice like local, that you engage with NAFTA and keep involved in hearing about what's going on at the public policy level. Stay aware, stay engaged. I hope that you participate in celebrations like Adult Education and Family Literacy Week and the COABE Awards that you all got information on about earlier in this session. And then I hope that you all complete that impact survey so that we can keep building out the tools and the resources and the programs that respond to your priorities and that meet your needs. COABE is here to support the adult education community, and we can do that best when we're all listening and learning together. So thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. Thank you for sharing. And I look forward to the next step in this journey together.
Thanks, Kristen. I just wanted to add thank you to everyone. It has been a wonderful day. I hope you've learned as much as I have, and I hope you'll be sure and watch for additional COABE resources that we're going to be adding to the webpage. So thank you so much again for coming.
All right, everyone. As we close out, we've heard from our Director of Leadership, Kristen, our Director of Professional Development, Marcia. Just want to thank them for their work helping to put this summit together. and for reviewing all of the resources that have come through, which are on our website as presenter recommended resources. But also want to thank our presenters who took the time. They're excellent presenters, each of one of them, who took the time to join us today, and all of you as well. So thank you for making this such a successful summit. We had over 600 that registered, and our goal is that we can just help impact you as you are going into the new year and thinking about how you're impacting the adult learners. So thank you for all that you do, and from COABE to you, we hope you have a fabulous new year. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.